everybody, I'm Scotti Lechuga, and this is how I packed to win the Arkansas High Country race this year. So let's get right to it. I'm gonna start with how I put the bike itself together. This is a hardtail mountain bike frame with a rigid front fork, 29er wheels with a 2.2 tire. For me, I needed the comfort of a big tire on the Arkansas High Country course. So these are my faves. I've ridden these the past 2 years in a row on the Arkansas High Country. They're Continental Race Kings. And I chose Di2 because it's so nice to just press that button and get a clean shift without having the stress on your hand. You know, after 800 miles, that gets tiring to be shifting big, little, big on a mechanical setup. I've tried both. If Di2 is an option, it's by far my choice. I also had aero bars, so I had so many hand positions, which really saved me. This is rough terrain, and so I could be here, and here. And that made a huge difference for me, just to be able to switch that up all the time. This is a pretty cool feature called a Fred bar, which allows the aero bars to come straight off the stem. I'm really a big fan of that versus having the clip-ons here on the bar. Gets you up a little higher and also back a little bit. So it's not for being aero, it's for being comfortable. And that is a huge part of endurance bike racing. My seat, my best friend. Ergon makes this saddle, which is a little plush for what I'm used to coming from a roadie background, but the Ergon SMC Core Women's Saddle really helps kind of distribute the pressure of the gravel over time. And for me, everyday gravel bike, this is my go-to saddle. I was super happy with it. For a drivetrain, I chose really small baby gears. I had a 36-26 double front ring, and I was so glad I used every single gear that I had with an 1142 in the back. We have really pitchy climbs here in Arkansas, and so it kept me pedaling at a higher cadence than like having to grind it out on a huge gear. So I was super happy with my setup. Like I said, I'm not a stranger to this course. This was my third time around this route, and I feel like this time I just had the bike that was ready for the challenge. So super happy with the specs. From there, I use a Wahoo head unit, and I actually have a backup head unit in my bag. But the route's loaded there. I use Ride with GPS to transfer that GPX file from the race promoter. I use Ride with GPS for practically everything from creating my own routes to loading a race route, and I get really nerdy and geek out on the course, and so I knew exactly where my resupplies were, a really good idea of the profile. I had all that on here so that I could just have peace of mind out there when I was pushing myself. So front headlamp, I had this as well as a helmet light, which I'll show you in a bit. This is my dog bottle. And I literally didn't drink out of this unless I really needed backup hydration. This bottle was at least always halfway full, and it's to squirt the dogs in the face with water, which is the method that worked best for me with keeping all the Arkansas High Country dogs at bay. And there were a lot of them, just hundreds of dogs, I feel like. So that was one of my major concerns, and this system worked really well for me. It was always there at my fingertips, ready to spray a dog right in the face. So, top tube bags. In here, I kept my battery. So, you know, this is my shifting battery, and I actually took 2 of these on the High Country. The first one at a full charge lasted me about 450 miles, and then I had to switch, and I could charge this as a backup as well. I kept my little salt tablets. These are just salt stick tablets. If I needed a little extra electrolyte value, I would take maybe 1 hour or so on the hotter days, and then kind of cooled off towards the end of the race. A wall charger with multiple outlets is super friendly for when you have devices you need to charge. And then I have a backup head unit, and I actually did use this a couple times. If this one was getting low and I wasn't in a good place to charge it, or I would just swap this on and upload the route. I would also just keep random like M&M packs up here, and just stuff that I needed to get to easy, like food, I would just top these off with. So this is my little headlamp, a Phoenix light, and I love this because I could rotate it. I attached it on my helmet with zip ties, and that way if I was off the bike and I needed to rotate it down to look at my bike, I could, or if I was on the bike, I'd rotate it up so it would track the beam a little more front. This is a anti-chafing ointment called Salty Britches. I use this like everywhere. I'd use it on my face if I felt like my lips were getting really dry. I'd use it on my chamois if I needed to. Just really versatile stuff that I'm a big fan of. I always like to keep my multi-tool really handy, and I love this one. It's got one of every size, you know, the screws and all the things. Just in case I need to tweak something really quick. And I keep my plugs really quick to get to as well, because if you do get a little flat, you know, you can pop a bacon strip in there without having to dig through everything else. Chain lube, I used this entire bottle this trip, and a lot of that had to do with rain. So I stopped a lot to re-lube, and ended up going through that whole bottle. Just some Tylenol, I used a lot of that. And then, yeah, I have my toothbrush and toothpaste, tire lever, a CO2 and inflator head unit, and then I always like to travel with a little pocket knife. It comes in handy if you need to like cut anything like a zip tie or self-defense, you know. So that's basically the top end of my bike. Here I rode with 2 tubes. I've only got one there right now, but I had 2. Didn't have to use them, so I was super lucky there. And then this is where I kept my cache battery, which a lot of you who have listened to my stories know that this sucker failed, and that was really frustrating. But it should have had enough life to go for about 3 or 4 days charging everything on my bike, but it tanked, so I was not a fan of that. I'll probably end up going back to my dynamo hub. But I just kept all my electronic devices here. I've got a phone charger. This is a Di2 charger, which I could plug into my cache battery and to the junction box up here. And I could get a charge to my Di2 system if needed. I did use that while I was riding. Comes in handy. Sorry, gentlemen, but this is part of bike packing as a female. Without a doubt, I start my period every time I do a bike packing race. Even if it's not that time of the month, it is a pain, and it's something women have to think about. So it's a reality, and it's what I take with me. On this side, it's not full right now, but this is my hydration pack that I chose. 2.5 liter Osprey bladder was pretty sufficient for most of the distances between resupplies. If I did need extra water, I would fill up my filter bladder as well. Catadyne makes these. It can kind of double as a bladder and a filter all in one. I only had to filter water once on the route, so that wasn't a big deal, but handy to fill this up. This is a 3 liter, so at any point I could carry about 6 liters of water. I like to keep my arm and leg warmers where I can get to them really quick, so maybe not have to get in and out of my seat pack. I keep them in here so I can just grab them while I'm on the bike and pull them on. Wet wipes, we don't need to go into heavy explanation of what those are for. So yeah, arm and leg warmers. And last, I always carry a little medical kit, and this just has, you know, like some sharp scissors, some antibiotic cream, maybe like some diarrhea type drugs that you can put in there, and some scissors and thread in case I needed to do any sort of tire sewing. I keep that stuff in here. All right, moving down to the tools. Apparel makes this cool little down tube bag where I kept sealant. Super happy I brought the sealant. I was debating it for like the whole week before, and decided to take a half bottle of sealant, and I ended up using it. I got a weird flat scenario that I'd never seen before where I just had like 30 pinprick holes all around my rear tire, and they were so small that the sealant wasn't even coming out, and so I couldn't find them. And I added more sealant and it took care of the problem. So in here, I've got disc brake pads, I've got spare cleats, spare bolts, a fix-a-spoke, which is a tensioner in case something happens to a spoke. And then in here, this is just kind of a tool bag with my patch kit, chain breaker. I've got a wolf tooth pliers set, which is great because it also doubles as a house for your quick links and chain links if you need it. I ended up using this. Ernie told me to take an e-tool before I left, and I was like, I probably won't need it, but I did need it. I had some connections here at my junction box that came out, and my fingers were, like the last day, my fingertips were so numb and dumb, I call it, that I couldn't get the e-wire back into the junction box. So this just pushes the wire back into the junction box. I'm really glad I had it. Safety pins, just because sometimes your zippers break and you gotta like close up a jacket. This is an e-wire, didn't have to use that, but if something ever happened to any of the wires here, I could make a new connection. Fingernail clippers and a spoke tool, zip ties, that's about it. Luckily, I didn't have to use hardly any of that. I had really, really good luck. And then back here, I was so happy I brought this. This is Apparel's packable backpack. It weighs nothing, and then it turns into a quick backpack that I used, I think, over half the race. I ended up using this to keep extra snacks. I would carry my bladder with extra water in here if I needed extra space. It became kind of my transitional bag for carrying things like my rain jacket. I would just take it on, take it off really quick. I loved having that. When I started the high country race, the day before, I was checking the weather, and it was really clear that it was going to be super hot on the first 2 days. It was like 90 plus degrees, and then the temperature just plummeted at the end of the week. So we had to have kind of a good plan for a full range of weather systems. This is my rain jacket, Mountain Hardwear, just a really good lightweight packable rain jacket. I tried to pack my seat pack in order of which I might use my things. Some things you need on and off throughout the day, so I pack those last, and then anything I use to maybe hunker down for the night would be very last in the bag, something I would get to when I'm really stopped and ready for sleep. So my quick go-to items are things like an extra sports bra in case I got really sweaty and wet, a vest. We were required to have an orange vest this year because it's hunting season in the Ozarks and Ouachitas. I always bring 2 chamois, so one that I wore to begin and an extra set of shorts, and you got to do it that way. I don't know why. I don't know how people do it with one pair, but extra base layers. I am a big fan of knowing that I have something dry to change into, just that's the layer against my skin. If I'm going to be stopping and I've had a rough day in the rain, I like to know that there's something dry that I can put on if I'm going to be stopping, because otherwise you get so cold. Even if it's not super cold temperatures, if you're wet, it just makes you miserable. So extra wool socks, those were mostly just for when I stopped to sleep. I wore these gloves a lot. These are my favorite. They're Defeat gloves. And I feel like these gloves are just very transitional for any temperature between like 45 and 75. If you need good grip, they're awesome for that too. Another base layer, I rode with 2, just so I had a dry one at all times. This is just a little head cover. I didn't really feel the need to pack anything super heavy for head covers, but this is just a little rapha neck gaiter that doubled up as an ear cover in case my head got cold at night. I deliberated a long time on whether or not to bring a puffy jacket. I only used it once to sleep in, so I'm glad I had it, but again, it didn't get really below 50, so, you know, You gotta sometimes pack a little more than you think you're gonna need just for peace of mind. Bivy, and this is just an emergency bivy, the kind that they give out to like triathletes after they finish their Ironman. It's basically like a solar blanket. And I ended up using this once. I got pretty cold on a night, and so I just got in here like a little potato and got myself warm. Also works as a good ground barrier for moisture if you're gonna lay out your sleeping bag on the ground, which I did 3 nights out of the 5 days I was out there. And this is just a 40-degree bag. It was more than enough for this to stay warm when I did stop, and this is just a Big Agnes 40-degree, very light down sleeping bag. So that was handy. I did use that several times. And that's everything that was in my seat pack. This is a 9-liter Expedition seat pack from Apparel. Love it. It's waterproof. All their bags that I chose are waterproof, and I really, really am thankful for that. They worked. I rode for 17 hours the last day, all in the rain, and nothing got wet. None of my clothes got wet. None of my devices got wet. They were all protected. So the zippers are very, very good for keeping the moisture out. Last but not least, the spot tracker. This is my location, GPS sensor, and this is how you guys are able to see us on track leaders. This is what broadcasts our GPS location, and it's required by the race to have it. So I'm super thankful. It's also an SOS system, so if an emergency ever happens, you can call for help and they know where you are. So this is how I packed to win the high country race this year. And if you have any comments or questions, I'm happy to dialogue with you either here in the comments, or you can check out Instagram and DM me there. I'm happy to share everything that I've learned. So reach out and hit me up.